Hello hunters! This week started off with a Monday to redefine Mondays, where we got not one, not two, but 3 new Monster Hunter Wilds videos on the Monster Hunter YouTube channel. Legit, Capcom making Mondays great, one trailer at a time. And to make it even better, they've been dropping videos each day this week, which finally answers some of the community's biggest questions. And if you're familiar with the channel, you know I like to pick out even the tiniest of details. So get ready, we've got some diving to do. But before we begin, I'm actually giving away a copy of Monster Hunter Wilds. The link is in the description, and the giveaway will be open until Wilds is available for pre-orders, so get those entries in while you can. The winner will receive a Steam gift, a game key, or a PayPal transfer in the USD amount to the base version of the game. So while you're at it, please make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay in the know. Now, back to the fun. The first of the videos we'll be covering today is the basic mechanics videos, which details some general principles familiar to pretty much everybody who's played a Monster Hunter game in the past 20 years. Moving on. More importantly, however, it does outline what we can do while mounted, and that segment specifically focuses on the gathering and navigation part of the gameplay loop. Now, I had touched on a lot of this in my theory crafting video about the mount and what Capcom might have in store for us here. Sure enough, there's a means to free roam, but that much was pretty evident from the very first trailer. However, we do see here targeted travel as well, where we can direct the Seikret to a target and it will shuttle us there automatically. This would effectively bridge the gap between World's Tail Raiders implementation and Rise's Palamute mechanics, allowing for both automatic and manual control of the mount. We also know from both the State of Play and the Summer Game Fest trailers that there will be a measure of mounted combat in some capacity as well. It's here we get our first sneak peek of the HUD. There's an indicator on the screen that shows the direction of our target monster, and for those who are familiar with World, there's a familiar mini-map complete with numbered zones as well. One pretty cool little detail here is that the map appears to shift perspective based on your proximity to your target. The further the target, the more isometric the view of the minimap appears, giving a gradual 3D effect, and then shifting to a more top-down perspective when the monster is in range. Additionally, in the Gunlance tutorial video, we can catch a few glimpses of some familiar-looking vines in the background. This establishes a similar form of verticality as World, where we can climb up or down ledges on foot, and I'm imagining that this will also be visually indicated on the minimap as well. We can also perform common functions like healing, sharpening, or gathering items while mounted, or just wave nostalgically to our old friends the scout flies, as the Seikret does all the traveling for us. Whatever your flavor, there's a few things to note here. First, and probably the most obvious, there's something suspiciously missing. In World, we had to track a monster down enough times before the scout flies would then attune to them, but here doesn't seem to be much, if any, at all. We've only got a brief glimpse of monster tracking, but it appears that the scout flies deployed the moment the hunt began, as evidenced by the Begin Hunt logo at the top. Second, and a little less obvious, is the eye catch for the Windward Plains. While I'm not going to dive too deep into speculation this time, fans of the channel will recognize something that was a pretty contentious topic in a prior video. On one hand, the logo bears striking resemblance to the helical rock face common to the area. We've seen it multiple times in this video alone, and it's become an iconic part of the trailer since Wild's announce. On the other hand, there's the aesthetic design that very closely resembles that of the words Monster Hunter in the Monster Hunter Wilds logo. Some of this can certainly be attributed to a cohesive aesthetic design, but go back and watch that video after you finish this one. I quite think you'll enjoy what the community has come up with. And last, probably least obvious, are at the timestamps of both 112 and 131 in the video. There are what appear to be cables or ropes tied between the lightning rods, as well as what seem to be decorative lanterns hung across them. Furthermore, there seems to be what look like campsites that we'll be operating out of when we're afield, serving as our first glimpse as to how the camping mechanics will be implemented in Wilds, as we then delve into the Slinger. We have fairly standard grab and shoot mechanics that should feel familiar from World. There's also different pods like the Flash Pod that make a return. But what sticks out to me the most is the hook that allows us to snag items from a distance or interact with the environment. We've seen how this can be executed in mounted combat to make a getaway or to just get a jump on a monster. Still, there's more than just what we see on the tin here. More on that in a moment. The combat mechanics touch on the new focus mode and focus attacks, which are designed to give players an edge when aiming or timing their strikes. Most notably, this is where we dial in for precision attacks against enemy weak points, which is the first real departure we see from World's formula at play. Previously, the scout flies would turn red once the player located the monster. Here, however, we see that they are integrated into focus mode as a means of highlighting a monster's wounds where we can capitalize on additional DPS. If you've been following along, this gives us two massive answers in how the combat will take shape. You see, I'd done a prior video on one particular tool in World's combat that was both missing from the debut trailer and quite polarizing for the community. The Clutch Claw. Love it or hate it, the grappling mechanic it afforded was pretty cool, but the primary criticism leveraged against it usually centered around the way that it broke the rhythm of the dance with the monster in combat, or the over-reliance needed to maintain optimal DPS via the wounding mechanic. And there we come back to that word again, wounding. Our first takeaway here, and it's already self-evident, we don't have a claw. Instead, wounds will manifest by repeated strikes to a monster's body part. Further yet, capitalizing on those wounds are an organic part of the flow of combat through focus mode instead of requiring us to grapple. Second, the presence of the slinger hook means that the clutch claw functionality we used in World is now made almost entirely redundant, where I'm willing to bet grappling mechanics, if any, could be seamlessly integrated into the function of the slinger without the need to disrupt the flow of combat. Use of grappling could be reserved for its utility in crowd control, for instance, when the flow of combat organically calls for it, and not as the only means to maximize DPS. Now, I would absolutely love to see takedowns and topples from grappling make a return in some capacity. We do know that we'll still be able to mount monsters the same as we had in Monster Hunter 4 and Monster Hunter World from the Insect Glaive video, but if they're going to incorporate these sorts of takedowns, I'd like them to be a feature or function of focus mode and its attacks, something that's seamlessly integrated instead of taking away from the fluidity that they were striving to achieve here. And as I was writing the script, Capcom did us a solid, dropping a heavy bowgun tutorial to complement the Greatsword one that released on Monday. Veterans of the series will note some familiar attacks and movesets to both of these videos, and then the third one that came out Wednesday for the Insect Glaive, these small vignettes of the weapon's intended uses and some of the new features and functions of the weapons in focus mode. And while it's not within the scope of this video to deep dive into each of these weapons individually, there's still some pretty cool takeaways from seeing these in action. Combos do seem to be fleshed out further, and while this is an evolutionary step forward from World, this will help double down on the high skill ceiling that veterans of the franchise enjoy. At the end of the day, there's a particular challenge to the Monster Hunter formula, but with equal parts player agency to allow the player to learn, grow, hone their skills, and adapt to enjoy that payoff when they finally bring down their next challenge. From jamming the Greatsword into the monster's mouth as a form of block or the ignition mode of the heavy bowgun, these are natural extensions of the moves our weapons carried in World. What tips this evolutionary into revolutionary, on the other hand, is the fact that we will be able to swap weapons on the fly, carrying two weapons into the hunt at a time. It's unclear whether or not any two weapons can be used interchangeably or if we're limited to one melee and one ranged, but both scenarios offer a significant increase in flexibility, where one notable Dragon's Hole mechanic becomes the running gag of the stand-up comedy act. In more general terms, the way these scenes play out are quite telling. We can continue to see a tangible weightiness to the movement, which is a hallmark of Monster Hunter combat. Although it's too early to tell just how nimble or weighty combat will be in general, we can get a pretty good idea from the short segment with the longsword Gunlance and the sword and board of the focus mode video. In specific, the gameplay isn't any faster than that of Worlds, despite all the conversations surrounding Wild's faster combat. This was most noticeable to me in the Insect Glaive tutorial video. It's true, Wild's seems peppy and fast-paced from the trailers, but from the side-by-side we can see animations are one for one with World, and that is a good thing. We've all heard someone criticize Monster Hunter referring to it as slow or clunky or complaining about its controls, and to some who've played Rise, this may seem like a step back in function and feel. But even with just a short glimpse of the hunting horn video, it's clear that the combos are smooth and responsive. Anyone who's ever touched a hunting horn knows just how notoriously cumbersome a weapon it can be. So if the combat isn't actually faster, why does it look faster? Now hear me out on this, because this is where the sheer brilliance of the Monster Hunter team shines. You're not playing a hack and slash after all, where you can cancel pretty much any moveset into the next. You need to be intentional with both your position and timing. In World, there's often some measure of delay from an input on the controller or keyboard to its activation on screen, where there's this wind-up recoil and recovery from a particular animation. A sloppy and lazy way for devs to smooth it all over in response to this criticism would be to just turn up the speed and make combat faster. Even a 10 FPS video can look smooth and buttery if you play it at 12 times speed. You see, Monster Hunter operates on an animation priority combat system. This is in contrast to a cancelable offense system where there's a much more instantaneous response to any given input that a player may give their character. Animation priority systems commit a player to the move or attack they've executed until the animation is completed. This alone creates much of the tempo and timing we're familiar with in our dance with a monster during the hunt. We as hunters have learned precision with our weapons and positioning, reading a monster's tells and knowing the exact moment to set up for our next swing. To make this feel more responsive, why not just turn up the in-game speed, thus narrowing the window for vulnerability and overcommitting and letting the players move more quickly? But Capcom knows this isn't what players want. We want control and agency. We want to have dominion over our character and to truly feel the visceral might in our attacks. The thrill of the hunt and the energizing combat are hallmarks of what Monster Hunter brings to the players. So instead of taking the lazy way out and just making it faster, this looks to me to give players more of what they loved about World, where we have a wide utility of skills to use at a given moment, and the ability to create chains or dodge with more fluidity. This feels dialed in and precise, not compromising with simple button mash hack and slash mechanics, but delivering full control over the hunter, the hunt, and the hunted. The seamlessness of each attack, swing, or action, and the fluidity through which it follows the player's command has managed to make the gameplay feel faster and more responsive than ever before, an extension of the player themselves, while yet slowing the pace down enough so we can preserve the precision and rhythm of our hunts. This is the magic of what Capcom can bring. And then the last thing that I want to note here is I believe that these videos just might have been taken on PS5 hardware. While I don't have any proof as of the moment, and it could just be YouTube compression from this 30 FPS video here, these blades of grass appear to demonstrate some dithering from an upscaler. And if that's the case, the PS5 looks to be running Wild's mighty fine at around a solid 30 FPS, which would be an absolute visual treat for our console-based hunters. Granted, PCs also use upscalers too, so this isn't conclusive, but I would half expect Capcom would want to use a full 4K 60 FPS powerhouse PC if that was the hardware this footage was taken on. More on that in the coming days. Now, we're just a couple weeks away from GamesCom, and with the way Capcom has been releasing videos on YouTube this week, I'm willing to bet they're building up to something big in anticipation of the main event. Here's where I'm willing to bet we could be getting that long-awaited release date. Prior to Wilds, Capcom's typical time frame from announce to release was around the neighborhood of 9 or so months, with the pre-orders opening sometime in between. Furthermore, release dates for mainline Monster Hunter games usually fall within Q1 of a new year. If Wilds follows this formula with March 4 release, then August of 2024 would fall quite similarly to the time frame of announce for prior Monster Hunter games. And though it's probably wishful thinking, I would be over the moon if we got a playable demo shortly after Gamescom, or perhaps see the pre-orders open. Whatever it is we get, it's sure to be exciting as more and more gamers have joined us in this global phenomenon. If World brought Monster Hunter to the core gamer demographic, Wilds will make it a household name. I'm Jade, and I've been covering Monster Hunter Wilds since its announcement at TGA 2023. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love to have your like and subscription, but even more than that, I've enjoyed the incredible comments and conversations we've gotten to share here together as a community, as fellow hunters, and I look forward to seeing you there. So, until the next video, may the Sapphire Star guide your way.